The Secret Story of Hin. Chapter 14. The True Origins of Bigfoot. The journey back to Texas felt infinitely longer alone, giving him too much time to think. The memories were raw, like fresh wounds he couldn't stop picking at. His last night in Cameron, Mexico, played on a relentless loop in his mind, the laughter of his people, faces lit by firelight, the mingling smells of sweat and hope. That night, they made a decision. They would call themselves the Jones people, not out of pride, but as a scar that linked them together as family for the rest of time. For the fallen, for the freed, for all who sacrificed, and for all who believe, Patwa had prayed to the group. What happened at the Jones plantation would not be erased, not by lies, not by time, not by silence. What we started was only the beginning, Him had told them, his voice cold, his eyes unblinking in the glow of the fire. A spark, and sparks ain't meant to stay small. They nodded, some in agreement, others in fear. Few understood the storm he carried inside him. Few dared to imagine the scale of what was coming. But Him wasn't asking for understanding. He wasn't asking for faith. The walk north stretched into weeks, the landscape shifting from desert to swamp to endless open plains. His legs burned, his ribs ached, and his mind seethed with every mile. For every step he took, he replayed the screams from the plantation, the crack of whips, the look on Sino's face as he was dragged to the hanging tree. Every cry, every lash, every death was fuel. By the time Texas appeared on the horizon, night had fallen. Under a moonless sky that cloaked the earth in shadow, Him waded across the icy, rushing waters of the Rio Grande. Every step was a battle, the current pulling at him like the hands of the dead. But he pressed forward, teeth clenched, heart roaring. When his boots hit Texas soil, he kept moving. The hunt never stopped, and neither could he. Him learned to become one with the forest and swamp, moving through the shadows as if he were part of them. The swamp wasn't just a place, it was alive, breathing, watching. It had secrets older than any man, and Him had learned to wield them like weapons. The swamp's secrets clung to him like a second skin. Every branch, every leaf, every murky puddle was an ally in his war. The coat he wore was no ordinary garment. It was a testament to Ida's brilliance, her defiance against a world that demanded their submission. The bullet-stopping vest Him once wore, riddled with the echoes of violence, had been transformed into something extraordinary, the first of its kind. Ida had stripped it down to its essence, her mind an alchemy of survival and rebellion, her hands sculpting scraps into a masterpiece of defiance. She worked tirelessly, her calloused fingers stitching bark and steel, moss and fabric into something that was more than clothing. It was a creation born of desperation and genius. Every piece she used wasn't just salvaged, it was transformed, imbued with purpose. Steel scraps became reinforced plates, fabric scraps became sinews of strength, and mud became an armor that whispered to the land itself. Ida's ingenuity was nothing short of brilliance. She wasn't just surviving, she was engineering survival. This coat wasn't simply protection, it was a manifesto, a proclamation, a weapon. Her work was an art form, raw and unapologetic, defying the very system that sought to crush them. Every stitch was an act of war, every patch a rebellion. She didn't just make a coat, she made hope, tangible and unstoppable. When Him slid the coat onto his shoulders, he felt it, her brilliance, her fury, her message. It was a second skin that fit him too well, as if it had always been meant for him. The weight pressed down on him, grounding him not with burden but with purpose. It was more than a shield to hide behind. It was the armor of a hunter. The swamp swallowed him whole, the coat rendering him invisible. But this time, he wasn't the prey. Him became the hunter, his steps silent and deliberate, the wilds bending to him like a predator lurking in the undergrowth. The powerless weren't just waiting to be saved, they were waiting for someone to shatter the chains, to break open the gates. Him wasn't just going to stop at survival. He was going to hunt the powerful, those who had enslaved, maimed, and murdered. He was going to find them in their estates, their parlors, their gilded prisons of privilege, and he would tear them down. This wasn't survival, it was war. It was justice. With Ida's genius stitched into his back and vengeance burning in his chest, Him wasn't just running, he was coming for them. And he wouldn't stop until the powerless stood free and the powerful knew fear. Every 300 steps, Him paused, his breath steady, his gaze sharp. He scanned the wild expanse around him, the weight of every soul depending on him pressing down like chains he refused to carry. Then he found it a tree with soft, pliable limbs. His callous hands worked quickly, almost instinctively, stripping a branch and weaving it into the Ida twist, a knot so unique it sang of rebellion. It was more than a marker, it was a promise, a sign left for those who followed, guiding them toward freedom. The Ida twist wasn't just practical, it was alive with meaning. Ida's ingenuity lived in its intricate design, the way it defied simplicity, the way it demanded attention yet remained invisible to those who didn't know its secrets. He tied each one with reverence, his fingers moving as though Ida herself were there, guiding him, whispering reminders of what was at stake. The knots weren't just a trail, they were breadcrumbs of defiance, scattered in the wilderness for the desperate to find. The trail back to freedom wasn't forming, it was being forged. Every marker was a declaration, a rebellion hidden in plain sight. Mexico wasn't just a place on a map. It was the dream Ida spoke of in the hushed, fervent tones of the enslaved. It was the land where the whip fell silent, where chains broke, where names replaced numbers. Him's hands moved with precision, each knot tied like a prayer, but there was no reverence in his heart, only anger. Anger for the lives stolen, for the bodies broken, for the cries ignored. As the Ida twists multiplied, the trail became more than a path. It was a blade aimed at the heart of the South, carving freedom through the thick, suffocating wilds. Every knot was a statement. We are coming. You cannot stop us. It wasn't just the trail to Mexico that was taking shape, it was the beginning of the end for those who thought they were untouchable. Patwa, though Patwa forged him in fire, she didn't just teach him to fight. She taught him to own his fury, to turn it into something lethal. She stripped away fear, shaped his rage into precision, and showed him how to wield a blade like it was an extension of his very soul. Every lesson was brutal and deliberate. She taught him where to strike so his enemies wouldn't just fall but feel every second of their defeat. It wasn't enough to survive. Patwa demanded more, she demanded dominance. Survival's for the meek, she would spit, her eyes blazing. You'd take what's yours. Together, Ida and Patwa had turned him into something unrecognizable, something the overseers and hunters would never see coming. Ida gave him the tools, the cunning, the invisibility of the wild. But Patwa, she gave him the fight, the raw, unrelenting violence needed to conquer. They didn't make him a man, they made him a weapon. A blade honed and waiting, sharp enough to carve through the rot of the system that had chained them all. Flinching in the face of death wasn't an option. Death would have to flinch first. He had mastered survival, not through luck but through ruthlessness. The swamp didn't give mercy, and neither did he. He drank from roots when the rivers ran dry, chewed bitter bark to keep the hunger at bay, and used mud to mask his scent from both man and beast. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the wind spoke to him. The swamp whispered secrets to those willing to listen, and him had learned to listen well. He used the swamp like a weapon. Vines became snares. Sharp reeds turned into spears. He made the waters work for him, leading his hunters into places where the mud swallowed their boots and the gators smelled their fear. Survival wasn't about staying alive, it was about making sure the enemy didn't. The old tale begins with whispers hushed, frantic murmurs exchanged under moonlit skies. When the swamp seemed to hold its breath, something was out there, something watching from the shadows, waiting just beyond the flicker of torchlight. They spoke of a presence too large, too silent, too deliberate to be a mere animal. It was a shadow that didn't just follow but hunted. They called it many things: Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and even Swamp Thing, a creature of nightmares, a towering figure with the gait of a man and the rage of a wild beast. It didn't just kill, it tore through its prey with the brutality of something that hated something that enjoyed the carnage. But those who had stared into the abyss and lived to whisper the tale said it was no myth. It wasn't a beast but a reckoning, born of the swamp itself. They claimed it was forged from blood-soaked roots and the bones of the forgotten, a curse that answered only to the land. It fed on the arrogant, the foolish, the wicked who dared disturb its waters, dragging them into the muck where even their screams were swallowed whole. It was no legend. They said it was justice, raw and feral, the legend of the swamp beast. The old tale didn't start in a single night. It built itself, whispered from blooded lips, spreading like sickness through the men who hunted the shadows. It wasn't just the slave catchers who spoke of it, but the traders, the overseers, the desperate men who patrolled the edges of the wilderness, praying they wouldn't be the next to disappear. Something lurked in the swamps, something that did not belong to man nor beast. Some claimed it was an escaped slave gone mad, a brute who had forsaken language, reason, even humanity itself, a wild thing that had learned to move like mist and kill without hesitation. Others swore it was something worse, an omen, a spirit of vengeance, the swamp itself given shape and hunger, a shadow with glowing eyes, a creature that moved between trees without a sound, that left no footprints except the bodies of men torn apart like carcasses left for the crows. The first ones to see it had laughed, a Negro playing ghost in the trees, a desperate runaway thinking he could survive where even the animals struggled. But then the bodies started appearing. It wasn't just the dead, it was the way they died. Some were torn apart, their limbs strewn across the undergrowth like discarded meat. Others had their throats slit so cleanly they looked as if they had simply laid down and died. Then there were those left hanging, dangling from the branches like slaughtered hogs, their mouths forced open, their tongues hissing messages, warnings. But the worst were the ones who were left untouched, their bodies whole, their faces frozen in expressions of terror so profound that the coroner swore they had died of fear alone. Their eyes were always wide, unblinking, as if even in death they were still seeing it. The hunters tried to convince themselves it was just a man, a runaway too clever for his own good, a savage who had learned to use the swamp to his advantage. A threat, yes, but nothing that couldn't be put down with enough bullets. Then came the ones who swore they had seen it, a shadow moving between the trees, too fast to be human, eyes like embers glowing in the darkness, a figure standing too tall, shoulders too broad, wrapped in something that made it blend into the night itself, a beast that did not breathe, did not bleed, did not die. Men who had never feared anything in their wretched lives turned back from the hunt, spitting out excuses about bad weather, about getting lost. But everyone knew the truth. They had heard it, a low, guttural sound that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite human. A sound that crawled into their ears and settled deep in their bones, making their hands shake, their knees weak. Some said it was laughter. Others never spoke again. And so the legend grew. Men who had spent their lives wielding whips, chains, and iron spoke of the swamp with unease. They told their sons never to stray too far, never to follow strange tracks, never to chase shadows between the trees. The smart ones left it alone. The foolish ones, they vanished, and as the bodies continued to disappear, as the whispers turned to frantic, gasping confessions from dying lips, the truth became undeniable. The swamp and forest had never belonged to them. And now something else did, something that hated them, something that was coming for them all. They almost caught him once, just once, a full patrol of mounted men and dogs backed by the confidence of steel and arrogance of skin. They swore they'd cornered him at the edge of the swamp, that he had nowhere left to run. One of them bragged about firing first 2 shots to the chest. He said he watched the beast stumble but not fall. Then 5 more rounds cracked through the trees, echoing like war drums. The figure flinched but didn't falter. Blood never spilled, breath never hissed. It kept moving. Not running, walking, straight at them. That's when they broke. Men who'd whipped others until their hands bled dropped their guns and turned to ghosts themselves. One tripped on his own feet and crawled through the muck like a child. Another fired wildly into the dark until the hammer clicked empty and he pissed himself in silence. They swore they'd clip him, hit him dead center. They even found shredded bullets flattened like coins and buried in tree bark miles from the scene. They started whispering about the coat, said it moved like moss and bark, like it was made from the earth itself, claimed it was part of him, grown into his skin, soaked in the blood of demons, cursed and holy all at once. It wasn't just armor. It was an abomination, something born in hell and shaped by fire. Some swore they saw steam rise when bullets struck it. Others believed it was magic, a conjuring, but it wasn't magic. It was Ida. She stitched it from pain and brilliance, rebellion and love. A mosaic of metal, bark, and stitched dreams, crafted not for warmth but war. She turned scraps into salvation, turning what was thrown away into something indestructible. And on him it transformed, made him more than a man. It made him a myth. When he moved, the swamp moved with him. When he struck, the trees echoed. And when he stood in the firelight coated in shadow, they didn't see a boy. They saw Bigfoot. But there was no beast, no creature, no ghost, only him, with the rage of Patwa burning in his bones and the genius of Ida wrapped around his flesh. The myth they created wasn't to honor the terror, but to bury the truth, because admitting it was a man, an enslaved boy, who had defied them, hunted them, terrified them to silence, that was too much for their pride to swallow. And so the legend grew, twisted with every retelling. They said he was 10 feet tall, that he had the strength of 10 men, that his eyes glowed red in the dark, that he vanished like smoke, reappeared in nightmares. They said he couldn't be killed, couldn't be caught, couldn't be understood, and in that they were right, because you can't kill what has already died and come back different. Still, to this day, they would rather keep telling their lies about the story of Bigfoot, though lies can be buried deep, just like a seed in the soil. When the sun calls, they too shall rise. The fact is, him was America's son, and when he rose, he lifted all of our spirits with him, those who were free and those of us still in chains. This is the true story of him.
Damn, that was deep. Thank you for walking with us through this chapter of Haunted, ground where the hunted became the hunter, and a man made of pain genius, and vengeance became a myth too terrifying to name. If this story echoed something ancient in your bones, honor it, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and speak your truth in the comments. Every voice is part of the legend. Every truth helps bury the lie. Chapter 15 is coming. Tap the link. Step deeper into the wilderness, where justice walks on 2 feet and fear has a name. Support the mission. Cash App, MyUtime. This ain't just a story. It's the truth they tried to rewrite. The myth they made to hide a man, and the vengeance of every soul still waiting to be free. He is not a monster. He is the memory they fear. He is him,